Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sun from EcoIdeal Consulting. I'm very glad to welcome all of you here in this afternoon's webinar. I'll be your moderator for this morning. I'm in the first session this afternoon. And later on, we will have another moderator moderating the panel discussion. Let me give you a little bit of introduction to this webinar before we start. So this webinar is one of the series of webinar that will be organized under this low carbon city program known as GTALCC, Green Technology Application for Low Carbon Cities. So this low carbon city webinar series are curated exclusively by the GTALCC under the support by United Nations Development Program Malaysia and also the Ministry of Environment and Water, CASA for Malaysia. So this project or the program is supporting the development of low carbon city in Malaysia. I'm glad to tell you that today our focus will be on circular economy, which is a very hot topics to many. Is how we can transform the linear resource flow to a circular way of managing our resources. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and welcome to everyone. I'm very pleased to see that there are more than 100 participants to this webinar, and this first of a series of 5 now, which I will talk to you in a second. So I'm very pleased to welcome you to this webinar titled, Is Circular Economy a Dream? Today's webinar is part of the Low Carbon Cities webinar series, which aims to create awareness and share good practices on low carbon cities. So this webinar series, as our moderator just briefly explained, but is brought to you by the Green Technology Application for the Development of Low Carbon Cities, what we call the GTALCC project, which is a 5-year project implemented by the Ministry of Environment and Water, CASA, with the Sustainable Energy Development Authority, Malaysia, as the lead consultant. This project is supported, of course, by the United Nations Development Program with funding from the Global Environment Facility. This project is aimed to facilitate the implementation of low carbon initiative and to showcase a clear and integrated approach to low carbon development in Malaysia. So I would like to really express my warmest appreciation to the key partners of this webinar series, the GTALCC project, CASA, KEDA, Jeff, and EcoIdeal Consulting. Thanks to them, we are brought together today for hopefully very interesting conversation and dialogue. There will be 5 webinars under this series, under the Low Carbon Cities webinar series, which all of them will highlight a different thematic area under the National Low Carbon Cities Master Plan. So just to give you a very brief idea of the topic of the future series as well coming. So today is Circular Economy a Dream? On the 2nd of June, there will be the second webinar on greenhouse gas inventory for cities, how to benchmark. So all very relevant questions. Renewable on the 9th of June, renewable energy in the future, myth or fact. So seems reality is not always as black and white as we think. Then on the 16th of June, net zero 2050 low carbon spatial planning. And the last one on the 23rd of June, decarbonizing transport in future. So regarding today's webinar, we know that cities are at the front line of the climate crisis. And data shows us that 85% of cities report that they are already feeling the weight of climate hazards from extreme heat, flooding, and rainstorms. Meanwhile, 70% of the world's population will live in urban area by 2050. This really highlights the importance of cities. And this means that to sustain future economic growth and for cities to remain safe and secure places to live and work, climate action must be one of the main priorities. This is especially so now at the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. A green, climate resilient and equitable strategy must be centered of all recovery effort if we don't want to continue in those cycle of crisis, building on the learning that cities and countries have from COVID-19, how we can build up stronger efforts against climate change. So regarding today's theme, the circular economy is an alternative approach to economic development, which aimed at designing out waste and pollution and keeping products and materials in use. It is an essential solution to the three planetary crises our world is currently facing now, which UNDP remains deeply committed to addressing the climate crisis, the biodiversity and nature crisis, and the pollution and waste crisis. So the circular economy is a very important agenda with potential to help deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and way beyond. So the speaker will be able to elaborate on all their experience under this thematic, but UNDP is really committed to support and work with national stakeholders in facilitating knowledge sharing and policy dialogue with diversity of stakeholders to address climate change and deliver and support Malaysia in delivering on the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. So in this context, we're very pleased to bring a diversity of expert speakers who will share their insight, their experiences on fostering a circular economy in cities, and we'll discuss whether circular economy is merely a dream or an achievable reality. So we look forward to your continued engagement over today's webinar and the rest of the webinar. Seri, and I wish you a wonderful deliberation during the discussion part. Thank you very much.
Sure. Also, okay, so there is a bit of a change in the way slides are moving here. Okay. And let me know if you see the slides moving. For some reason, it has taken away the control of moving the slides. Let me reshare just.
I can do it for you if you are having trouble. Don't worry.
Yeah, let me just reshare. I will just try it once again.
Yeah.
Hopefully it will work. Yeah, is my screen visible? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is moving. Yeah. So hi everyone. Good afternoon. And really looking forward to this interaction. I didn't say that we were batchmates in Lund University in Sweden. So it's very good to come on a platform which is now being created across Southeast Asia to drive circular solutions. So what I'm going to share is a broad experience, not from the electronic waste side, but from the plastic waste side. In India, a regulation was introduced in 2017 that which mandated EPR in the space of plastics, single-use plastics. And though not all types of packaging material are covered, but a very large chunk of packaging material gets covered by this regulation. So so Karusama had started its functioning in the space of extended producer responsibility and circular economy from electronics, and then we transitioned and added our work on plastic waste. What we started was in plastic waste is a very unique solution in India. So we have created an entity which is owned and managed by the brands themselves. So almost 30 brands came together and set up this entity under a consortium which is called PACE. And this entity is focused on setting up of collection systems across the country, getting the collected material recycled, and ideally make it go circular. So we launched this entity in September 2019 with the primary objective of helping brands go truly circular. Here again, experiences from e-waste came in fairly handy. And one of the biggest learnings was that if we are looking at solving the problem at scale, then it is super critical that brands participate at a grassroots level. And this sort of a structure where they are jointly creating an organization which is going to set up collection channels as well as recycling systems becomes a fairly unique proposition in its own self. The focus that we have in terms of various materials in India is all types of plastic, single-use plastics. So we are looking at PET, multi-layered packaging, HDPE, LDPE, BOPP, beverage cartons. Of this, by far the largest fractions are multi-layered packaging, LDPE, PET, followed by HDPE. So that is how the volumes are scattered across the country. What we are doing via this entity is creating a new structure which has ability to expand across geographies, focus on creating a completely non-compete platform. So we are looking at solutions where we can collaborate with existing ventures, existing organizations, civil society organizations across the country to create the solution at scale. Also, one of the objectives here is to catalyze innovation. There is absence of recycling solutions for a whole range of plastic waste. So how do we enable that sort of innovation in recycling is also something that we are looking at. And then two very large issues pertaining to the creation of this entity are: how do we drive awareness across the country? How do we encourage people to come forward and participate in waste management systems in an active way? And how do we create physical infrastructure which can lead to collection of waste? One big challenge which is present in most emerging markets is the presence of informal sector for waste management. And that is again a very significant focus area, that how do we work with waste pickers and aggregators, formalize them, work on creating their livelihood sustainable, considering the present scenario. This entity is now creating infrastructure for dry waste collection and sorting in multiple cities in partnership with urban local bodies. We are also planning, second part of the work is impacted by COVID, but as soon as things are fine, we will also start creating consumer touch points through retailers in the country. And then for formalizing the informal sector, we are setting up small collection centers where informal sectors can participate, they can sell the waste that they have collected, so that it doesn't end up going to poor quality recycling units. And also these centers become formal spaces for aggregating waste pickers. As I shared, there are, in terms of recycling infrastructure, India has, I would say, decent infrastructure for recycling PET. But apart from that, most other materials, the infrastructure is either absent or dismally on the low side. So there is also a good amount of work which we are trying to do in terms of catalyzing development of this physical infrastructure for recycling. From an EPR point of view, certain points are super critical for the long-term success of the schemes. One of these points is the financial transparency. So any organization which is funding the initiatives wants to understand where is the money being spent and what is the true cost of compliance. So this entity, because by its very nature is owned by the brands, allows that full visibility of compliance costs to the brands. It also enables bringing up the hidden issues of working with the informal sector to the fore, which allows them to work and systemically solve social issues in the supply chain. And most importantly, the entity follows the global norm that if we are to solve the problem at scale, then producers need to participate at a grassroots level and need to be very, very deeply connected to the reality in terms of collection and recycling. This whole work that we are doing is driven by a technology platform. This platform, we started utilizing this platform for our electronic waste management. work, but now have extended it to cover plastics waste. And what it does is essentially creates full traceability of the waste. So where does the waste get generated? Where is it picked? How is it recycled, sorted, and then recycled? So it allows full traceability of the waste and transparency in terms of costs. So this platform we are now also utilizing in a few other markets beyond India, and assessing that can it enable other organizations who are wanting to take this journey. I'll go to, this is my last slide, and I'd like to spend a couple of minutes on this. In any country which goes and starts following EPR-based systems, they tend to hit a roadblock after a point in time. And we are starting to see that in India now. And these are some of the bottlenecks or the challenges which needs to be sorted if we are to further gain maturity in our system. One of the first challenges is that brands, when they participate in an EPR program, in most cases, they do not know what is the cost of compliance. So which essentially means that they are looking for the lowest costs and leading to a race to the bottom without really understanding where, what is the right amount of money which needs to be spent. So any country where EPR has to be introduced, it is very critical that government does some benchmarking study on what is the right cost of compliance. And this data is published, republished again and again, so that this race to the bottom ends. The second part is from an enforcement point of view, instead of focusing only on large brands, it is critical that enforcement bodies focus on all types of producers and create a level playing field. Otherwise, the system starts cracking after a few years. It is also very important to have digital systems for monitoring, because the amount of data which gets collected post implementation of EPR for compliance purposes is immense. And unless we are able to sort this at scale, we will not be able to again enforce the regulation, which will again lead to cracks in the system. And the last, but again one of the most relevant, is creating adequate infrastructure, because if you are increasing collection rates, then you also need to match it up with adequate recycling infrastructure in the country. And if this infrastructure doesn't exist, then one may end up collecting, but the waste will not get recycled, which essentially hampers the whole system. So this is a broad overview from my side. I'm happy to take questions at a later stage or whenever the time comes. Thank you.
Yeah, all good.
Okay, all right. I'll start a timer so I don't go overboard, because I can talk about concrete for hours. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ramon Skane, and I'm a co-founder of GeoFly Concrete and Cement. Now, in short, we have a dream to reinvent the most used and manufactured product in the world, which of course is concrete. So backing things up a bit, what actually is concrete, just in case some people aren't aware? So concrete is ubiquitous in the modern world, and it is made up of 4 major ingredients. These ingredients are coarse aggregates, such as blue metal or gravel, or just some rocks you could think of. Fine aggregates, such as sand, and these 2 types of aggregates give concrete its strength. But the glue that holds them together is the binder, or the cement, and the cement is mixed with water. So essentially, these 4 ingredients, once they're mixed together, the cement and the water glues the aggregates together, and you have a strong foundation. So looking into the concrete market, how big actually is it? So looking in Western Australia, where I'm from, the concrete market in Western Australia accounts for $777 million per year within the state alone. And for anyone a little bit unaware, Western Australia state is roughly half of Australia, but there's not many people in it. So expanding out, looking nationwide, how much concrete is used there? A whopping $4.4 billion per year worth of concrete is produced in Australia alone. Now, if we look in Southeast Asia, then we get $129 billion worth of concrete per year. So the reason I put it in dollars instead of cubic meters of concrete is because we're talking about circular economies here. If we just talk about volumes, we want to talk about finances as well. So one of the main questions we had when looking at these astounding numbers for the amount of concrete produced around the world is how much greenhouse gas emissions is associated with this normal concrete, sometimes called Portland concrete from the Portland cement. And we found that 8% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions is made just from the production of concrete alone. To put that in perspective, if the greenhouse gas emissions from concrete was listed with other countries in the world in terms of emissions, the emissions from China would be number 1, the emissions from the United States would be number 2, and number 3 would be the country of concrete. If you have all the car emissions from Europe, China, and the United States combined, then you have almost the equivalent of the greenhouse gases emitted from concrete. So it's an astounding number. And this comes because with the production of normal cement, ingredients have to be mixed in a kiln at 1400 degrees. And when they mix, they react and to produce carbon dioxide. So there's carbon dioxide from that, and there's also the electricity requirement related to the greenhouse gas emissions. So knowing all these facts, we thought, how can we make, our goal was to try and make this more sustainable. How can we do this? So we thought, is there a way to put waste materials into our concrete? How can we approach this problem of this astounding amount of greenhouse gas emissions from a circular economy approach framework and consideration of climate change issue? One thing we're very sure of is that we want to do it from a private industry perspective. Although we are from universities and our academic background has helped us with this, it's private industry which is the most mobile and the most quick. If we do this through a government agency, it's going to take a long time. Climate change is a problem now. We want to be active. So along with that, another one of our goals is to approach it with a triple bottom line assessment. So to consider the social, economic, and environmental considerations of what our business could provide for a circular economy of concrete. So doing some research, we found a particular product in academia called geopolymer concrete. And in short, geopolymer concrete has the capacity to hold a significant amount of waste, including fly ash. For those of you unaware, fly ash is a byproduct of the coal combustion process from coal power stations. So approaching it in our state of Western Australia, there's a town to the southwest of Perth called Collie, and Collie is essentially the powerhouse of the state, and it has 3 big coal power stations. As they're closing down with the renewables, they still have a lot of fly ash. So again, whenever you produce electricity from coal, you have fly ash. In this region, 300,000 tons per year of fly ash is produced, and also 1.5 million tons per year of recycled aggregates is used. Now we can use this fly ash to make an eco-friendly cement, and we can use the aggregates, recycled aggregates, to replace the natural virgin materials. And we can do this all in Collie, which is what our goal was. So moving on, so just to clear up, what exactly are we doing? Essentially, all we're doing is taking the fly ash from the coal power stations, which is a free resource. These stations want to get rid of their waste. And we're taking recycled aggregates or construction and demolition waste, and we're putting it in our facility to make eco-concrete, which we sell at a profit because we're a private industry. So looking a bit more closely onto the products themselves. So eco-cement is made by mixing the Collie fly ash in a reactor with some specific alkali chemicals. These chemicals heat up the solution, an exothermic reaction, and combine with the fly ash to form geopolymers. Now, a significant factor about our concrete, our cement, is that it can be made anywhere at room temperature. No high temperatures are required. No 1400 degree kilns. So right there is a significant amount of greenhouse gas reduction. Looking in towards our concrete, we just mix our eco-cement with recycled aggregates to make our eco-concrete. And it performs just like normal concrete. And it can, the benefit here is that we can harbor a lot of waste materials. So looking to the climate impact, as I said before, 8% of the world's CO2 emissions are produced from cement production alone in the world. Our estimates suggest that 1.3 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalents per year is produced from WA cement production. And we could reduce that with our facility by 131,000 tonnes. So just to put that a bit more clearly, our concrete is responsible for 80% less CO2 emissions than conventional concrete. And that's because we can make our cement at room temperature from waste materials. This is a significant factor. So in terms of potential products, what can we actually use this for? Well, just as a little bit of a demo here, I've actually got the concrete we're making right here, and I'm not too sure how good the lighting is, but this is our eco concrete, geopolymer concrete, and it looks exactly like normal concrete. In this concrete is the fly ash from Collie, and it's very strong and it can be used for almost any product. We also have another concrete here made from red mud, which is a byproduct of the bauxite refining process to produce alumina. So as you can see, this is just like normal concrete. It's just made a little bit differently. So in terms of the products that we can use concrete for, again, concrete is ubiquitous in the modern world. It can be used for everything, almost everything. Walk trail panels, general construction, smart pavement, reef modules, outdoor furniture, tilt-up panels, freeway barriers, soak wells, pipes, culverts. If you're not convinced, community art, freeway sand walls, landscaping, curbing, fire rings, campgrounds, wheel stops, bollards, house slabs, the list goes on. It can be used everywhere because it is used everywhere. And our concrete is just the same. It can be even used for traffic cones. This is a bit of a joke between us because we had some excess concrete to put somewhere and we had a traffic cone mold. So the point here being that it can be used for everything. Anyway, moving on. So we wanted to look at the Sustainable Development Goals outlined by the UN to see how well our business would adjust to a circular economy framework amongst other Sustainable Development Goals. So again, we can see that 8% of the world's CO2 emissions are from the concrete industry. We reduced that by 80% with our concrete. So that goal is achieved. We're also closing the loop on valuable waste materials by using them in our concrete. We're turning them into valuable valuable resources, and depending on the application, we can use it to save against other climate change issues such as erosion, using it for artificial reefs or seawalls. We're also, in terms of innovation in industry, we're also the first company in WA to commercialize a geopolymer technology. And in terms of economic growth and decent work, we're providing 50 jobs in Collie from our production facility. So we're meeting a lot of goals here from the UN. So just to summarize, the problems we are addressing here is climate change and the economy. We're helping transition economies from non-renewable to renewable energies, from non-green to green frameworks, from linear economies to circular economies. And we're helping the economy by providing more jobs, again with the industry transition. And we're helping against poor waste management practices. Essentially, we are taking waste materials, turning them into a resource, and by using the waste materials, we're also cleaning up the world. So I'm running out a bit of time here, so I might just quickly dart through. Our dream is to do some lab scale testing, which we're in the middle of right now. I'm in the lab right here, and then have a pilot scale plant in Collie, and then eventually have a full scale commercial plant in the Perth metro area. The more concrete we can make, the more the environment will be saved. 80% less greenhouse gas emissions. And that's pretty much the end of my presentation.
So good afternoon, everyone. I'm here today to present to you is Circular Economy a Dream. So my presentation to you is going to answer that, and that is no longer a dream. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So let's have a reality check right now. Our world currently, according to the Circular Debt Report 2021, the world is only 8.6 circular. That means only 8.6 of the material that we are using right now are circular, leaving a massive circular gap. The bad news is that in 2018, we are still at 9.1%, and the trend is going down. The good news is that we need to only roughly double the current rate of 8.6 to limit the global warming to well below 2 degrees. And we are slowly moving out of this pandemic right now. And from what I've researched in the last 14 days, circular economy is gaining momentum again. It is like a snowball. It is not really here yet, but you can see that the snowball is rolling down the hill and it is heading towards our direction. And it's going to be bigger and bigger and faster as it rolls down. Next slide, please. So here I'm presenting to you, we are heading towards circular economy. The upper bar is just a quick snapshot of the timeline of what European Union has been doing. And as you can see here, globally, we are already starting to transition to circular economy. It may feel a bit slower, but it is the fastest adoption of new economy system that I've seen so far. And obviously, because circular economy itself is not a really new concept. It started off from cradle to cradle, closing the loop, double loop, and now what McKinsey and Ellen MacArthur Foundation did was they power everything, all the goodness into one and rebrand it and tada, circular economy. But if you're in the waste management side, or if you're in this industry long enough, you know that circular economy is actually not new. Right now, for EU and Scandinavian countries, they are the one who is leading the circular economy. Countries like Finland and Denmark, they're doing an amazing work in this movement. We are at a very, very interesting period. Within European Union itself, starting from December, they adopted the first circular economy action plan. And by 2019, the first circular action plan was already fully completed with 54 actions has been delivered. In March last year, a new circular economy plan actually came out. Interestingly as well, circular economy are extremely quite strong in European Union as well as Scandinavian countries. But what surprised me is that the South American countries like Costa Rica, Peru, and Uruguay is actually getting this as well. So in 2019, Uruguay is the first country to launch this Uruguay Security Award, and they have been awarding companies who are very innovative in terms of security for the last 3 years. So for last year until 2011, we all experienced a pandemic. We all kind of put on a pause, and obviously that affected the movement of circular economy as well. But in this year alone, since the last 3 or 4 months, we can see that a lot more countries are actually picking up that again. Countries like China, South Korea, outside of Europe and Scandinavia, a lot of them the country itself do not have any roadmap per se to circular economy directly, but they do have a lot of roadmaps that's related to circularity, like plastic roadmap, single-use management, that kind of thing. Next, please. And then in terms of circular cities, we are actually growing in terms of the numbers of cities that are now participating in circularity. According to the Carbon Disclosure Project globally, worldwide, Cities en Route to 2030, a study done over a decade that reviews cities' action and ambition. And here last year they published that more cities are measuring the emission right now and are setting up citywide targets. So countries are leading it, but certain cities decided that they don't need the leader to take that, and the mayor actually took over and developed all these building resilience against climate threat initiatives. So as of last year, a total of 3,417 actions, ranging from tree planting to greening, has been developed. So cities en route to circular cities in Malaysia are Petaling Jaya, Kuala Lumpur, Georgetown, Iskandar, Melaka, Batu Pahat, Hantua Jaya, Putrajaya, Tawau, and Penang Pang. Next slide, please. Apart from that, what I noticed is that a lot of new culture, new, how do you call it, new retelling, new way of doing things are coming slowly. Asda from Germany actually opened its first a refutable station in UK, and it is actually the shoppers are actually liking that because they can choose to wait and go according to how much you want to buy instead of pre-packed and pre-selected for you. And they are partnering with big major household brands like P&G, Kellogg's, Unilever to introduce all these refutable stations that enable helpers to reduce, reuse, and recycle at ease. This initiative alone estimated to save 1 million of plastic bags per year. This is from one supermarket. Then I also noticed that more and more secondhand shopping mall, used furniture mall, used clothing mall, especially in Europe and Scandinavian countries coming out. Supermarket that sells only rescue food. So food that is already passed by their use by date or short expiry. Now there are even a proper supermarket that actually sells this. Next. And then furthermore, if you notice more and more global brands, like even McDonald's, they are taking up and they're slowly embracing circular economy, especially these multinational companies. And eventually, what they are doing will escalate down to our country. So I'm actually looking forward to them coming in and be the accelerator that change the circular economy culture in Malaysia. Next, please. So I'm going to share with you now what is Malaysia doing. Next, please. So Malaysia, we are moving from green to circular. The revolution of sustainability in Malaysia is developed after the establishment of GTALCC in 2009, with the vision that we will become the industry leader for sustainability development in energy in terms of national water and green technology. So we then subsequently went and developed a national green technology policy as well as the green technology for 10 Malaysia plan. We also then developed the national sustainability consumption and production blueprint that serve as the pathway to sustainability consumption. And this is for the period of 2016 to 2030. Inside this blueprint itself, there are goals that work towards circular economic system, especially on the waste management side. So Malaysia do have the ambition to move towards to circular economy, as well, especially for single-use plastic, for a cleaner and healthier environment by 2030. So we already have a roadmap towards zero single-use plastic. We launched that in 2018, and a circular economy roadmap for Malaysia are on its way as well. In last year's budget, our government actually announced quite a huge amount of financial scheme to support the government's effort to accomplish 17 of the UN SDG goals. So the government itself also, from what I see, is that they are leaning towards circular economy and they are supporting circular economy. 2 days ago, our Prime Minister, during the roundtable discussion in Virtual Asia Commonwealth leaders, he also mentioned that we are in a discussion to incorporate circular economy in Malaysia as part of our development plan to drive the systemic shift for the country. Next. And in terms of the city level, Kuala Lumpur has a low carbon society blueprint 2030. Kuala Lumpur is ambition to become a world-class sustainability city by 2030 and to reduce the city carbon emission intensity by 70%. And DBKL is very, very aggressive. I really, really hope that they can continue that momentum. They recently launched a barter system as well, whereby they use waste such as plastic, to be exchanged for food items. The program are called One Kiosk, One Community. And this is especially for the people who are living in the PPR, public housing scheme, where people can actually collect plastic waste, segregate them, and actually go to a counter that's set up by DPKL and exchange those plastic waste into food. So I like this idea because this is now pushing the responsibility, the segregation responsibility back to the citizen, and DBKL actually had the facilities to enable them to exchange and facilitate this waste management, satellite waste management, especially with these public housing people. Last year as well, under the International Urban Cooperation Asia, several cities in Malaysia actually participated in a stakeholder meeting to embark on a city-to-city knowledge sharing, research and innovation, as well as exploring investment and business opportunity together with EU and IUC. So a blueprint for the city will be published, especially for Penang and Petaling Jaya. Furthermore, led by my co-organizer, CUCKL, Ms. Jacqueline Tan, they also prepared the Malaysian blueprint for circular cities, where it's a complement proposal to the Malaysian circular plastic economy roadmap, and it's expected to finish it this year. And the aim of this blueprint is also to support the government and the key stakeholders to implement circular economy for cities level. Here in Petaling Jaya, the City Council also has a very impressive record on implementing food waste collection and food waste circularity model. As recently here in the city as well, they started segregation at home, partnering with companies like Nestle and iCircle, and so we are collecting curbside collection implementation. Okay, I'm given not much time right now, so I'm going to quickly zoom. Next slide, please. So here are the adoption, Malaysian adoption for circular economy. Unfortunately, it's not very responsive. Only 7% are currently adapting to circular economy. And the key barrier is the lack of understanding of circular economy and risk management. Next, please. In Malaysia, there's quite a few interesting movements in terms of innovation by the Malaysian companies. I pretty much like this biodegradable drone that is designed by UPM, that's made out of pineapple leaf waste. And we're also starting to move into biodegradable packaging as well. Next slide, please. Recycling is still one of the favorite technology in Malaysia. Heng Hiap, a plastic manufacturing company here, is one of the pioneers in circular economy and the first company in the world to receive a ocean-bound plastic recycling certification, where they use ocean-bound plastic and turn it into really beautiful furniture. Recycled plastic bottle is also gaining momentum right now in Malaysia. Several companies are using that, especially for drinking bottle. Next slide, please. Here we also notice that new businesses are emerging in Malaysia. We have app that is integrating a circular economy through share model. We also have Rentwise, who are doing rent and remanufacturing. We also have Tapi, who uses use and return model. Next slide, please. And what is interesting here is that you can see that a lot of small businesses are actually taking over this initiation, and they are doing their own thing. Next slide, please. So I'll just briefly tell you, for us in circular economy chapter, we're very active in promoting circular economy, and every year we do a circular economy week, city week. So first year I did some food composting workshop, and second year we did a food waste management as well. And this year, coming in this October, we'll be talking about circular fashion. Along the way, so I'm actually quite active with the UNEP as well as the UNIDOR site on the EPA consulting on circular economy, and we are also introducing food laws and food security systems together with the FAO site. Next slide, please. So this is coming to my last slide. Is circular economy a dream? From what I've presented, I hope to share with you that it is no longer a dream. In 2018, European Parliament actually wondered that same question. And 2 years later, they finalized their first set of circular economy implementation. And as of now, they're already on their second stage of implementation. From what I've researched in the last few days, I can see that globally, we are already transitioning to circular economy. From linear economy and recycling economy is no longer viable. The related question now for Malaysia is actually, when are we going to start? Because the world is heading towards circular economy and it's no longer a dream. It's a matter of how fast can we adopt. The last slide, please. The time is running out. Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's start. So, riding on a lot of optimism in this panel, most of the audience are indicating that circular economy is not a dream, it's reality, right? But I want to pose this question to the panelists. I've been hearing a lot that this is the decade for change. But what is different now compared to before? How has the driving forces for the support circular transition shifted from when you started and compared to now? Maybe I'll point this question first to Mr. Pranshu.
Thanks, you. So I think that the changes that we are seeing are essentially in the regulatory side. More and more regulations are starting to come up. There is a very clear increase in public pressure, which is leading to this development of new regulations in this space. So which is a very positive thing. So in the last decade in itself, India has now seen a great number of regulations coming into this space of product management. So how do we focus on products instead of manufacturing for controlling pollution? So I see that as a big change. Another big contextual change is the attitude of people towards participation in activities which lead to sustainable lifestyles. So these are, I think, two big contextual changes, and they are again happening because I think people are now seeing their daily lives getting impacted. Earlier, environmental issues were quite far. They were loss of biodiversity was happening, but was again not impacting me. So I think now that people are starting to realize some of the impacts in their own lives, things are starting to change. So both regulatory and consumer movement is a big change that I'm at least evidencing.
Thank you, Pranshu. And just picking up on what you said about, consumer activism and people are changing, people want change. I want to ask Sudhi this because I know Sudhi works a lot of communities, just conducted several communication workshops on circular economy and the likes. So Sudhi, what have you noticed from your engagement on the ground with consumers, families, households? What gives you hope? What makes circular economy reality from what you've experienced with your engagements?
I'm looking forward to the young generation, especially the one in the primary school. Right now, they are the ones who go back home and tell their parents what not to do. And I really, really like that. And I really, really hope that there will be the generation that remind us, the adults, that we cannot continue to consume, go through the whole old linear economy, which is take, make, and throw. That second thing is also I see that there's a lot more new technology that is accelerating to the transition of circular economy, and there's a lot of outside the box creativity, which I'm very much looking forward to. In Malaysia, yes, the younger generation are the force and the driver, as well as the community. A lot more community are established, NGOs or social enterprise. So we are in a very exciting time right now. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sudhi. I guess one more stakeholder that's very important in this equation, right? When we talk about communities, when we talk about participation, is the entrepreneurs. And we're also seeing a lot of entrepreneurs coming from the youth group, coming with new ideas, like Ramon here, who started this company that seems to have a winning formula. It's good sustainably, it's winning economically, 20% cheaper than conventional cement, from what I read from your website, Ramon. So I want to bring in Ramon here. Could you tell us a little bit more about your journey starting up GeoFly? What inspired you? What are some of the challenges in getting it off the ground?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think Pranshu and Sudhi answered that question pretty brilliantly. I think regulators are still going a little bit slow because some people just don't like making a change. They don't like being the ones to step up. But slowly and surely it can happen, and it's definitely accelerated. In terms of the journey that we've had, this whole company / idea started off with a university project under Martin Ander from Murdoch Uni. I know you're one of the students. And essentially, this is the middle of COVID as well, so we couldn't do anything else besides study, right? And eventually COVID ended up finishing, and we thought, wow, this is a pretty good idea. And our main concern is the environment, and it could do wonders for the environment. So we happened to pitch it to the local government. They loved it, and they're on board with it. Now we have a research project funding. I'm actually in the lab now where we make our concrete, which I've got here. And yeah, it's going well. So the journey was just from a student to co-founder of this company. So again, you just need to be opportunistic. We weren't expecting this, but it's happened. And it's been an amazing journey so far, and we're just at the beginning.
And Ramon, just to dig a little bit deeper into that, what help have you gotten from the government stakeholders? Do you see any policies that could help businesses like yours grow, especially in the early stage?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, one of the best sort of policies you can have in terms of most environmental issues is a carbon tax. But unfortunately, Australia is regressive when it comes to that. So the current policies that sort of enable us to go further is the government has put a lot of money into specific towns to aid their transition into a just transition. So for instance, with Collie, they're known as the powerhouse of the state, and all the power generation from the state is from Collie. But obviously, as rooftop solar has been adopted and renewable energy technologies proliferated more throughout the state, less people use coal power. And these power stations are going broke. In some cases, they're going into severe debt. And there's a very big fear that places like Collie will eventually become desolate and jobless because everyone will move away from the town and it will become unstable. So to fix that, the government does a lot of policies to help in the just transition from coal to renewables. And the funding that we've got for our research project is partly from one of those policies, because we're taking the waste from those power stations to make a product that could be a business for Collie. So it's part of the transition. So there's transitional sort of policies to sum up.
I think it's incredibly important that we have policies that support a shift from using more virgin resources into more renewable materials. And we're also seeing this, especially in the plastic sector. And I'm sure Pranshu would be able to speak more on this, right? A question to you, Pranshu. In India, in many ways, has been leading in the EPR area. Like in 2012, you have an EPR for electronics, and then 2016, 2017, you have regulation on plastic waste and mandatory EPR for companies. So what can you say would be some lessons learned from this early start into getting more producers responsible for their waste? What lessons do you see for countries that are now currently taking this theme up, like Malaysia, you have Indonesia, Vietnam all coming on board? So what are some of the pitfalls, right? I want to really focus on what can we learn from India's experience?
So India started sometime in 2012 with electronic waste rules. But again, was it in time? For me, I think it was still late. Countries started almost a decade before, more than a decade before this, their journeys. So whilst India has started, I think what is good is to see the number of sectors which are now being focused at using EPR as a baseline principle. So we started with electronics, then moved on to packaging. Draft battery waste tools have been announced. We are looking at end-of-life vehicles. So some of the challenges, as I said, and for me, the biggest challenge whenever one is handling EPR is a deep understanding of cost of compliance. Because essentially, you are asking brands to go and spend money to collect, to create collection systems. And in countries like ours, most of Southeast Asia, we are talking of a very large informal sector which is working. And one needs to create formalized systems, create inclusive systems so that people whose livelihood are dependent on working in these sectors are suddenly not left abandoned. And it is almost also impossible to compete with informal sector in a whole range of things. There are great amount of skill sets which have been honed over decades. So one of the things is, how does one, using a deep understanding of costs of compliance, enable systems which are socially relevant? So what is happening is, whilst we go for EPR to minimize the cost of compliance, there are a lot of shortcuts which are being made, which may lead to undesired social implications. So it is very, very critical for any country taking this path to discuss costs of compliance very openly, set up benchmarks, bring in full transparency in terms of what have you spent, where have you spent, how has that money benefited the country or the problem at large. And this will enable a level playing field today, because some of these things are hidden. And again, this is a very new era of regulation. Most of the country officials are accustomed to regulating manufacturing units, and this suddenly requires regulating products. It is essential that we utilize crowdsourcing, use crowd intelligence by publicly revealing all the data sets, publicly revealing the amount of money spent, amount of infrastructure created, so that the problem, you have a lot more people participating. So for me, that is very critical. This cost of compliance is an issue which is a very, very challenging issue, and not just in India, it has been a global challenge on how do you bring in the true costs and make people accountable for what they're supposed to do.
Thank you for that. I completely agree. We need to have the information on cost of compliance clearly communicated, but also having full transparency, because that really wins trust from the community, if the government and the private sector, right? I do want to follow up because we do have questions from the Q&A, and while I can be selfish and ask more of my questions, we have a question for you, Mr. Pranshu, that relates to what you just mentioned. So with regards to the challenges of EPR implementation, one of the challenges, I think you also highlighted this in your earlier presentation, is the lack of adequate recycling infrastructure. Could you give an example of where, what this gap actually is?
Okay, so let's take, and I'm going to focus only on plastics in this conversation, because that's what I talked about. So if we talk of, let's say, multi-layered packaging, it's a low value plastic, generally not picked up by waste pickers because there was no recycling solution for them. Only in this EPR regime, there is an artificial market has been created for collection of multi-layered packaging. But once you have collected it, what do you do with it? Today, the only solutions that one has, and where India is focusing, is on co-processing. So most of this collected multi-layered packaging is being sent for co-processing in cement plants. So once you are able to control the pollution, but there could be so much recovery which could have been done if we had the technologies. So we do not have any solutions in that space. If I talk of HDPE or hard plastics, apart from PET, there are certain number of units which are doing hard plastics recycling, but not an adequate number which is required to solve the problem at scale in the country. Majority of the units tend to be still in the informal sector. So again, apart from PET, I think there is a critical need to set up these units to solve the problem. Whether we talk of HDPE, again, there are certain solutions, but not adequately spread across the country. For MLP, we have no recycling solutions, or there are pilot stage recycling solutions which have come up. If we talk of beverage cartons, again, very few recycling solutions or reconversion solutions exist. So whenever we come up with an EPR regime, we also need to provide solutions so that waste doesn't have to travel crazy distances. In our system, for example, what we evidence is because the recycling units are not spread across the country, an adequate type of, or the quality of recycling unit also matters. Then you end up traveling the collected waste to hundreds of kilometers, which again then has its own negative impacts.
No, thank you for that. And I think you really highlighted that technology and the existence of solutions really plays a key in completing the equation. So I do want to bring this question back on that note to Ramon. In the construction industry, and we have a question here on the Q&A that asks about, what can you say about the market conditions in terms of governance that is preventing more players from adopting more circular models, like what GeoFly has done with its concrete? If it's cheaper, it's great for the environment. Why don't we see more?
So some concrete manufacturers have tried adopting more circular economies. So they've included some fly ash in their cement. They call it a supplementary cementitious material, or SCM. But the amount of fly ash they put in is, in all honesty, pretty minimal. It's just to meet certain guidelines and to put a green logo on there for their marketing. So although there has been some circular economy adoption by the major industry, it's minimal. And the reason it hasn't been sort of, I guess, invoked more in the industry is simply because people like things staying the same, especially when it comes to concrete. People are very familiar with concrete, and they don't like people changing their supply chains. So one of the issues we're having is that the people that will adopt this concrete is going to be, early adopters, and they're going to be the risk takers because it's a different type of concrete. People aren't used to it. Even though it's very similar to normal concrete, people just like things to stay the same. If that answers your question, partly.
There's lots of system inertia everywhere. And when we talk about circular economy, it's always systems-based solution, collaboration all the way to get it started. So I do want to bring back the questions to Sudhi. Ramon mentioned, yes, we have optimism. We have solutions that are starting out, but then there's still some stickiness in the system dynamics. And I think really from the top level, right? Let's talk about national indicators. We see that there's a, I don't know about you, but I personally haven't really seen a lot of changes in the way our national growth is being monitored, progress, like what is our macro goals, right? But we do see, efforts at the city level, like the city of Amsterdam adopting the donut model. So I want to hear from you, Sudhi. What do you see? What do you hope to see at a high level, right? Or is it even needed for us to alter this system dynamics
Definitely, we always need that high level to support. It's very hard for me to say that right now because the leadership itself is in it's not my position to comment on that. But I can say, of course, is everything what we wanted to do, and at this moment, the ground people, people like us, people like you and me, are actually actively moving circular economy in this country right now. And for what I hope to see is that we don't need to rely on our government to implement something. We can all do it ourselves. Even right at home, we can do some changes. Say, for example, we start using collecting harvest rainwater, for example. So every one of us has the capability to adopt circular economy, and we don't need to wait for the top leader to come and direct us. And especially in this country right now, this is my personal experience, and I hope that companies, especially companies, are aware that there's a lot of benefit when you adopt circular economy. So a lot of hidden benefit that you are unable to see, like the customer value, the sustainability value, the technology value, as well as the relationship value that you can create through circular economy with your customer. And those value are the foundation that help you to build a resilient company, because again, the future are already going to that direction. So it's a matter of time whether how soon do we want to meet that future. So I hope that our government, the top high up, is not leading. We can take that road ourselves and lead our way there.
Definitely. We have a question actually very related to that. We have one of the audience ask, what any ideas how to get zero waste Malaysia? And I guess in a similar vein, what can civil society organizations, NGOs do to be more impactful in their efforts to support the circular economy?
I think we should collaborate. We should actually combine all our forces and together and do take advantage of each and everyone's strength, and rather than you do yours, I do mine. Because from what we have seen so far, climate change is very related to circular economy, and circular economy is very related to zero waste. We are all want to do good for the environment, and we should come together and share the strength and share the resources and build that road together, because I think we are much stronger than individual. Every one of us do our own things, and we don't have the clear direction. Yeah,
absolutely, Sudi. We are at 3:59. I wish we had more time, but I don't know, Mr. Soon or Tun Yang, do we have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah, I think Tuni, please continue for another 5 minutes. I hope people can stay back.
Okay, great, because I really wanted to dive into the role of the private sector. So a question to you, Pranshu, as an organization that is owned by the brand owners, can you tell us a little bit more about what role can the private sector do in Malaysia? And we do see private sector taking action in Malaysia. We have a voluntary PRO that's coming up. So could you give us some advice on how the private sector in Malaysia could meaningfully contribute and fund initiatives that support the circular economy? Is there a framework that we could follow? Give us the deep.
So As I had shared earlier, I think the answer lies in regulations in most of these things. So, and if because some of these systems, designing these systems would require large scale participation and not just front runners. So whenever we talk of voluntary action, we generally, and if you look at not just countries in Asia, but if you were to look at Europe or any other spaces, you will find only a few companies tend to act in a very voluntary system. Now, considering the decade of change, and we alluded to the decade of change earlier in our conversations, if we are to drive the amount of action that needs to be taken, I believe regulation is a must. Without regulation and strong enforcement, it is very difficult to drive the monumental changes that one is looking at this point in time, because there is little time to act. So if we are saying that by 2030 we have to look at most of our waste being managed responsibly, then I simply fail to understand that can it be done voluntarily. So I believe regulation is critical to success. Once you have a regulation, it allows a platform for then even competitive companies to collaborate. We see that a lot, both on a voluntary basis as well as in mandatory regimes. But that industry participation where few brands come together, create a joint platform. Without that collective action, again, the kind of infrastructure for collection that is required is almost impossible to achieve. Whilst I only focused on recycling in the past conversation, but it is very critical to create systems for collecting this waste back, and ideally in forms that it is not mixed with multiple types of materials. Another thing which happens once you bring in a regulatory regime is you can control the type of materials which are being put on the market. Mixing of materials of various kinds is a huge problem. If you think about a product which has various types of plastics in the same product, becomes a challenge to recycle. So again, regulation allows that sort of changes to happen. But at the end, it will be a common platform which allows that large scale systemic change. So I'll stick to that point that regulation is critical, and then some market leaders joining hands, creating common platforms, and then as I said earlier, technology will again be playing a very critical role in terms of monitoring data sets, in terms of ensuring traceability of what has been collected, how is it being recycled, what are the costs of compliance. So a digital system to monitor all these aspects and putting these data sets for public scrutiny will be a game changer.
Thank you so much, Pranshu. To just play a little bit of devil's advocate, regulation is indeed critical, but at the same time, we see regulation to fail, become ineffective in a lot of countries. So regulation is critical, but not enough. There's a question of enforcement, there's a question of design and adoption. So I'm going to open this last question to the floor. To any Sudi, Ramon, Pranshu, feel free to comment. How do we bridge the gap between regulation and action taking place on the ground? And to add, especially in the context of Malaysia, we have 90% of businesses that are SMEs. How do we get them in the game? How do we motivate and encourage inclusion throughout the industry?
I would say definitely a push and pull strategy. The local businesses have to understand that the future is on conscious consumer, and we need to come to meet that future soon. And we need to jump into the circular economy bandwagon. Obviously, if we wait for the regulation to come, we may be a bit too slow already. So for the full system is that knowing that whatever you're going to do right now, you're doing it for the good, and you're doing it for a conscious society and for a next generation. Whereas for the push incentive, I would probably say I hope that government will come up with some kind of incentive to also assist on this, not only through EPR to force them to move into this sector, but also some kind of like a tax incentive or rebate to assist them to start this kind of accelerate this economy. So, yeah.
Well, if there's no input from the other panelists, I think we can hand it back to Mr. Soon.
Okay, once again, thank you so much. And before
Thank
you
you,
go, please
everyone.
fill out the poll questions. And I hope I can see you all again